Wait lang. Ayun. Okay. Okay. So, dito na tayo sa historical background of the development of law and legal structures in the Philippines. Hindi naman nagkaroon lang bigla ng justice system dito sa ating bansa. Of course, may alamat 'yan. Okay. So first is the pre-Spanish period. So in pre-Spanish times, the basic unit of society as it is today was the family. Hanggang ngayon. Several families made up a community called a barangay. And up until now, yan pa rin ang gamit nating term, di ba? Kung magkakasama kayo sa barangay, kumbaga isang community kayo. There was no central government before, unlike today. The chieftain headed the barangay. He was alternatively called the Datu, Raha, Lakan, or Hari. Yun yung mga tawag sa barangay captain noon. And sila na rin yung, kumbaga, pinaka-presidente para doon sa community nila because ayun na nga, walang central government before. The chieftain acted as the leader who issued rules to be observed by everyone in the barangay. And up until now, ganun pa rin naman ang trabaho ng mga barangay captains. They still create several laws that are to be implemented in the barangay. For example, curfew hours. Yan. Yung mga bawal magtapon ng basura sa mga ganitong lugar. Okay. So any dispute among members of the community was referred to the chieftain and or a council of elders who resolved the controversy. In any case, the chieftain consulted the elders of the community in his actions. Kumbaga, ito ay mga advisors, yung council of elders. Kasi nga, nakatatanda sila. At kapag ikaw ay nakatatanda na, kumbaga, mas wise ka na. Okay. The observance of standards from this rulemaking processes produced customs or a way of life which, though not written, were handed down from generation to generation by word of mouth. Later on, i-discuss din natin yan sa types of laws kung ano yung tinatawag na common law, pati mga customs because these are unwritten laws. Hindi tulad ng mga na-discuss natin na mga batas. If you can remember, Republic Act 10175 yung sa cybercrime, Republic Act 9165 yung sa tungkol sa drugs. So yon written law. Kasi nga, nababasa siya. Talagang literal na nakasulat siya. While before, meron ngang mga standards na pinatutupad yung mga chieftain, although hindi lahat ay nakasulat. Pero pinatutupad nila ito. And ipapasa ito generation to generation. At yun na nga, yung mga naging custom, yun na yung mga tinatawag nating unwritten laws. The chieftain organized the able members of the community to provide protection to its members. Dahil hindi pa naman talaga na-organize yung mga barangay kagawad o yung mga tinatawag nating BPATs ngayon. So kung sino yung mga may kakayahan, yung mga able members nga ng community, sila ang magpo-protect sa community nila. In turn, the members of the community provided a portion of their harvest to the chieftain. Kumbaga, yun yung sabihin na nating sahod nila. So the laws that govern the inhabitants of the barangays thus consisted of rules issued by the chieftain, the decisions made by the chieftain and or a council of elders, and the customs that evolved from these acts. So take note ha, yung mga rules na pinatupad ni chieftain ay kumbaga nai-practice ng mga members ng community. Kaya siya naging custom at naipasa na ito. Okay. So these unwritten rules varied across communities depending on the evolving values of the members of the barangay. And I guess depende na rin sa kanilang chieftain kung ano yung mga naging values doon sa kanilang barangay or sa kanilang community. While the law that prevailed during the pre-Spanish period consisted mainly of these unwritten laws, there is also evidence of some written laws during this period. The Maragtas Code, issued by Dato Sumakwel of Panay Island, sometime between 1200 to 1212 AD, and the Code of Kalanchaw. Some would spell it W, Kalanchaw, instead of O. Pero same lang yun. Okay? Issued by Dato Kalanchaw, also of Panay, in 1433. Okay. Next, the development of laws during the Spanish period naman, 1521 to 1898. So the colonization of the Philippine Islands by Spain began when Ferdinand Magellan set foot in Mactan on March 16, 1521, and claimed the islands in the name of the Spanish crown. Uh, Pero sa history na yan, di na natin i-discuss. The Philippines was initially established as a dependency of Mexico, replacing the barangays with a centralized government administered by the Mexican viceroy under the control of Spain. During this period, a number of laws in Spain were extended to and took effect in the Philippine Islands. The Penal Code, the Ley Provisional, and the Ley de Enjuiciamiento Criminal. So the Code of Criminal Procedure, the Ley de Enjuiciamiento Civil, the Code of Civil Procedure, ang hirap naman. The Code of Commerce, the Civil Code, the Marriage Law of 1870, the Mortgage Law, the Mining Law, Law of Waters, the Copyright Law, the Railway Law, the Notarial Law, the Law of Foreigners for Ultramarine Provinces, the Code of Military Justice, the Las Siete Partidas, Las Leyes de Toro, Las Leyes de las Indias, and La Novísima Recopilación. So these are written laws that are originally from Spain. But since we were colonized by Spain, inextend nila yung aplikasyon niyan dito na sa ating bansa, dito na sa Philippines. Okay. A court system was also established in the Philippine Islands with the Royal Audiencia on top of the hierarchy, the equivalent of our present-day Supreme Court. Since pag sinabing Supreme Court, it is considered as the highest court of the land. This means that whatever the Supreme Court says or whatever the Supreme Court has decided ay siya na. Hindi na siya mababago. Okay? So however, decisions of the Royal Audiencia were appealable to the Supreme Court of Spain. Yun ang difference. Kasi sa Philippines before, dun nga sa Spanish period, the highest court in the Philippines was the Royal Audiencia. Today, the highest court is the Supreme Court. Pero, kung ano yung desisyon ng Royal Audiencia, ay pwede kang umapila pa sa Supreme Court doon sa Spain. Kasi nga, di ba, colony lang tayo ng Spain noon. So, kumbaga, pwede mo pang ihabol, sabihin na natin, pwede mo pang ihabol doon sa Spain. Okay, but now, kung ano ang sabihin ni Supreme Court natin, hindi na mababago. Okay, so when Mexico separated from Spain in 1821, the Philippine Islands became governed by a governor-general appointed by the Spanish crown. The governor-general enjoyed vast powers, including the enforcement of decrees from Spain. Under the Spanish colonization, Filipinos fought for their fundamental rights. The propaganda movement demanded the assimilation of the Philippines by Spain and the extension to Filipinos of civil and political rights, such as the protection of person and property, specifically freedom from arbitrary action, particularly the Guardia Civil. Masasabi natin this is the military nowadays, yung Guardia Civil noon. And I know you have heard of this since lesson pa natin ito during our elementary days. Okay. When the propaganda movement failed, Andres Bonifacio founded the Katipunan in 1892. This was the military arm of the secessionist movement, with the principal objective of creating an independent Filipino nation through armed revolution. So while preparing for separation from Spain, the representatives of the movement undertook constitutional projects on May 31, 1897. A re- on May 31, 1897, a Republican government was established in Biak na Bato. Yun yung Biak na Bato Republic, yung tinatawag. Followed on November 1, 1897, with the unanimous adoption of the revolution's representatives of the Provisional Constitution, popularly known as the Constitution of the of ano to? Biak na Bato. Okay. However, 2 months later, the Pact of Biak na Bato was signed, under which the Filipino military leaders agreed to cease fighting against Spain. Ayaw na daw nilang lumaban. In exchange for monetary indemnity for the Filipino men in arms and other reforms. So, binayaran. General Emilio Aguinaldo had by then become the military leader after Bonifacio's death. He and other Filipino leaders agreed to exile themselves in Hong Kong in December 1897. Oh, lumayas na lang daw sila. In 1898, the Spanish-American War broke out and Aguinaldo came back to the Philippines. On June 12, 1898, Aguinaldo became the president of the revolutionary government. In September 1898, the Revolutionary Congress was inaugurated, and its primary goal was to formulate and promulgate a constitution, yung atin na. And yun na nga, yung Malolos Constitution. So next period was the American period, 1898 to 1935. The Malolos Constitution was short-lived. It took effect in January 1899, but after its promulgation, war between the Philippines and the United States broke out, and the Republic survived for only about 10 months. On March 23, 1901, the Americans captured Aguinaldo, who thereafter took his oath of allegiance to the United States. So it was, uh, I think we've discussed this already regarding allegiance. Kung maalala niyo yung discussion natin tungkol sa citizenship, 'di ba? Kumbaga, you are pledging your loyalty to a certain country, certain state. So ito si Aguinaldo, yun nga, ang oath of allegiance niya ay ibinigay niya sa United States. On the other hand, the Treaty of Paris was concluded on December 10, 1898. It transferred sovereignty over the Philippine Islands from Spain to the United States. I also think familiar na kayo dito sa term na sovereignty, na-discuss na rin natin yan. So because of the change in sovereignty, all of the political laws, that is, the laws governing the relations between the state and its citizens, were abrogated. Thereafter, American political law prevailed over the Philippine Islands. So, after the Spain implemented their laws in the Philippines, sunod na batas na na-implement sa ating bansa ay yung sa United States of America. However, the laws emanating from Spain was that regulated private relations, or those among individuals, continued to remain in force. American President William McKinley, in his instruction of April 7, 1900, to the Second Philippine Commission, announced his intention to form a democratic form of government in the Philippines. He provided a guide for the transition of the military government into a civil government. Kasi nga, di ba, yung nasimulan ni Aguinaldo was a revolutionary government. So ngayon, babaguhin na. Magiging democratic na. During the transition, the military governor managed the affairs of the Philippines. So, ito nga, during this time, tinulungan tayo ng Amerika na mabago ang ating uri ng gobyerno. So, from military to civil. President McKinley also relayed the recognition of some inviolable rules, or the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights is also indicated or also stated in our Philippine Constitution na ginagamit pa rin natin hanggang ngayon. So these rules provided, among others, that eto, siya pa rin ang gamit natin ngayon, ha. No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Ibig sabihin, lahat tayo may karapatang mabuhay, maging malaya, at magmay-ari. At hindi pwedeng kunin sa atin yun basta-basta kung walang yung tinatawag na due process of law. Uh, for example, hindi ka pwedeng mag-conduct ng arrest basta-basta. Hindi ka pwedeng mag-aresto ng trip mo lang o yung, kumbaga, hula mo lang, gut feel mo lang. You cannot do that. There should be due process of law. So if you are still a suspect to a case, you cannot be arrested outright. There should be uh, enough evidence to prove that you have in fact committed a crime. Hindi basta-basta. Okay? And we call that probable cause. There should be probable cause for a warrant of arrest to be issued. Before a warrant of arrest could be issued, kailangan mapatunayan muna, meron ba talagang krimen na nangyari? Meron ba talagang probable cause? So yun, dahil nga, kaya naman ganun, dahil right to liberty is a constitutional right and it is not, it should not be violated without due process of law. And then no person shall be twice put in jeopardy for the same offense or be compelled to be a witness against himself. Ganito yan. For example, a person has been accused of murder in one court. Then that court said na not guilty. O di tapos na yung kaso, not guilty nga, edi he should be set free from jail or from prison. And then, sabihin na nating makulit ang biktima, yung pamilya ng biktima, nag-file sila ulit ng case with the same offense in another court. Same offense, same pieces of evidence, same everything. Well, you cannot do that because that would constitute double jeopardy. Okay. Or be compelled to be a witness against himself. That means that you have the right to remain silent. Yun. You cannot be a witness. Kasi 'di ba, ang trabaho ng witness ay magsalita, magkwento. So, ikaw na akusado ay hindi ulit. Ikaw na akusado ay hindi pwedeng pilitin na magsalita to be a witness against himself. Okay? That's why you have the right to remain silent. Kasi nga hindi ka pwedeng pilitin na magsalita. Okay? So the right to be secure against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. That's why if a search will be conducted against a person, kailangan meron munang search warrant. Okay. So if, ma'am, paano kung caught in the act, may hawak na pong kutsilyo, mananaksak na, kailangan ko pa po bang mag-apply sa korte ng warrant of arrest at search warrant? Well, hindi na. Siyempre, caught in the act nga. Ano pang, di ba, nakikita mo na may sasaksakin na, pupunta ka pa, tatakbo ka sa korte. Your Honor, pwede po bang manghingi ng warrant of arrest o kaya search warrant? Kasi po, may masasaksak na po doon eh. Siyempre, hindi mo na gagawin yun, di ba? So, you have, well, if it's what we call in flagrante delicto, caught in the act, pwede na yun. But if it is not in flagrante delicto, you have to go through the process. Because again, you have the right to property and liberty, which is a constitutional right. Okay. No law shall be passed abridging the freedom of speech. Kaya nga, merong freedom of speech. Pwede natin sabihin yung gusto natin. But, to a certain extent lang, hindi tayo pwede magkalat ng mga bagay na hindi naman totoo, mga bagay na hindi naman verified. Bakit? Because, of course, that is against the law. You will be sued for libel. Okay? Or of the press or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances. Kaya pinapayagan ang mga welga. Pwede yon, kailangan lang may permit kayo kasi police officer should be also dispatched where the rally is being done. Of course, for order lang din. Paano kung nag-rally naman sa gitna ng intersection? Medyo mahirapan naman, kawawa naman yung mga bumabiyahe, di ba? So, yun. Kumbaga may proper place and may proper permits uh, for you to be allowed to peaceably assemble. Hindi pinagbabawal ang rally. Sinasabi lang kailangan ng permit para sa kaayusan. Okay. The military governor also set up a new court system consisting of a Supreme Court, courts of first instance, which is obviously first instance. Ito yung korte na unang humawak doon sa kaso. First instance nga eh. And the justices of the peace courts. On June 11, 1901, the Supreme Court was organized, which consisted of a Chief Justice and 8 associate justices. Effective September 1, 1900, legislative power over certain subjects such as the raising of revenues, appropriation, and expenditure of public funds, and the organization and establishment of courts passed from the military governor to the commission, subject to the United States President's approval. Kumbaga, nung time ng nung Spanish period, maaaring makialam pa yung Spain mismo, yung kanilang leader doon, yung kanilang king. And then here, during the American period, there are instances na may paalam pa dapat doon sa Amerika. Okay. However, the executive power continued to remain with the military governor until the Spooner Amendment to the Army Appropriations Bill, which abolished the position of military governor. The executive power was then assumed by the president of the Philippine Commission, who became the civil governor. Kasi nga, di ba, military tayo nung una, then nag-transition tayo to a civil government. The Philippine Bill of 1902, which was enacted on July 1, 1902, then provided for the holding of a general election of delegates to an assembly, which was to become one of the houses of a bicameral legislature or two houses. Yan na yung tinatawag na lower house, upper house. Na ayaw nilang tinatawag sila nun. Pero yun yung bicameral. Kaya dalawa. Pag isa lang, unicameral. Okay, so the Philippine Commission was the other house. The first general elections were held on July 30, 1907 for a body which was to become a permanent structure of the Philippine government, the National Legislature. And ito na nga yung Congress. The Philippine Autonomy Act of 1916 or the Jones Law declared the intent of the United States to eventually withdraw from the Philippines and to recognize Philippine independence when a stable government was put in place. For the first time, the law expressly provided for the principle of separation of powers among the legislature, executive, and judiciary. Yun na yung three branches of the government. At dahil nga ang term dyan, merong separation of powers, they cannot meddle with the affairs of each other. Wala silang karapatang makialam sa trabaho nila ng isa't isa, rather. Ayan. On March 24, 1934, the Philippine Independence Act, also known as the Tidings-McDuffie Law, was enacted. Baka, naririnig nyo na rin to noon pa. It guaranteed independence to the Philippines and authorized the drafting of a Philippine Constitution to be ratified by the Filipino people. The law provided that the government should be Republican in form, and the Constitution to be drafted should contain a Bill of Rights. Thus, the Constitutional Convention of 1934 was convened, and then the 1935 Constitution was drafted. Yun yung first constitution natin. In the meantime, in the field of criminal law, the laws defining crimes and providing for their punishment was the Spanish Código Penal of 1870 remained in force. On January 1, 1932, the Revised Penal Code or Act number 3815 was enacted by the Philippine legislature. Nagamit pa rin natin hanggang ngayon. Imagine, 1932 pa yon, pero gamit pa rin natin. Of course, hindi naman lahat ay siya pa rin. May mga amendments na dyan, katulad nung sa drugs. 'Di ba? Meron ng Republic Act 9165, which is an amendment to a certain law. Tapos yung law na yun yung nag-amend doon sa Revised Penal Code regarding drugs. What else? Rape. Rape before was categorized under the Revised Penal Code as a crime against chastity. Pero nagkaroon ng batas, binago. Ang rape ngayon is part of, ano to? Is a crime against person na siya. Kaya mas mabigat na. Okay? Ulit, sa Revised Penal Code, ang rape, crime against chastity. But now, since the amendment of that certain provision ng RPC, crime against person na ang rape. Kalinya na niya o kalahi na niya ang murder, homicide. Okay. So it retained most of the features of the Spanish Código Penal. The Revised Penal Code subsists to this day. On the other hand, commercial law, which affects certain commercial transactions and relations, became a commixture of Spanish law and American law. Some commercial laws from Spain were retained, while new laws on certain areas were introduced, such as corporations, insurance, and securities using American models. And then we have the Commonwealth period. Ito na yung 1935 to 1946. The 1935 Constitution was approved by the Convention on February 8, 1935. On March 23, 1935, U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt affixed his signature on the Constitution. By an overwhelming majority, the Filipino voters ratified it on May 14, 1935. So, katulad nung nabanggit kanina, kailangan kasi aprubahan ng Filipino people yung Constitution. And during this time, ayun na nga, naaprubahan na. On November 15, 1935, the Commonwealth government was inaugurated. Then came the Japanese occupation from 1942 to 1945. When World War II ended, American sovereignty was finally withdrawn from the Philippines. Philippine independence was proclaimed on July 4, 1946. Yun talaga yung petsa ng Philippine independence. It was by no coincidence that this date matches America's own Independence Day. Kasi sa Amerika, July 4 din ang kanilang Independence Day. Nagkataon na parehas sa atin, yung actual. Ma'am, di ba, June 12 ang Independence Day. Okay. In a period of the Republic, eto na, 1946 to the present. In the 1960s, there was a demand to revise the 1935 Charter so that it may be more responsive to the problems of the country in the socio-economic area and to address the threats to the security identified by then President Ferdinand E. Marcos Sr. In 1970, delegates to the Constitution Convention were elected, who convened on June 1, 1971. On September 21, 1972, martial law was declared to enable then President Marcos to allegedly control the insurgency. Kumbaga, pinatupad ang martial law because of the insurgency para masupil. Yun. Okay. And ito yung time na Congress was abolished and the President assumed both executive and legislative powers. If you can remember yung kwento ko doon, during martial law, walang Republic Acts. Meron lang PDs, Presidential Decrees, because it was the President who created laws. Di ba? 3 branches nga, executive, legislative, judiciary. And inabolish nga yung Congress which was part of the legislative. At ang tumayong uh, legislative legislative branch was also the executive, which is the president. So in the meantime, the 1973 Constitution went into effect, and on January 17, 1973, the people's rights in the 1935 Constitution were reaffirmed, and the government took on a parliamentary rather than a presidential form. In 1986, President Corazon Aquino rose to power in the EDSA Revolution of February 23 to 25, 1986, sparked by the tarmac killing of former Senator Benigno S. Aquino, her husband, on August 21, 1983. On March 25, 1986, President Aquino issued Proclamation Number 3 adopting a provisional constitution. The provisional constitution, otherwise known as the Freedom Constitution, provided for the adoption of a new constitution within 60 days. Kaya, nagkaroon ulit ng bagong constitution, yung ikatlo. So the 1986 Constitutional Commission thus drafted the 1987 Constitution kasi in-implement siya, 87. So which was ratified and became effective, yun na nga, February 2, 1987. Yan yung constitution na gamit pa rin natin ngayon. So as in the 1935 and 1973 Constitution, ang ikatlo is the 1987, which we are still using until today. So it retained a republican system of government. In summary, after a civil government was established in the Philippine Islands with the assumption of American sovereignty, laws were enacted through 5 periods of legislation. So first was during the Philippine Commission ending in 1907, then the Philippine Commission and the Philippine Assembly ending in 1916, the Philippine Legislature, the Senate, and the House of Representatives beginning in 1916. By the way, Senate yung kinoconsider na upper house, and then the House of Representatives are the lower house. House of Representatives because they represent their localities, their provinces. Yun, localities nga. The Philippine Legislature beginning in 1916 and continuing until the establishment of the Commonwealth on November 15, 1935. And then fourth, the period of the National Assembly under the Commonwealth under the proclamation of the Republic of the Philippines on July 4, 1946. Ating Independence Day. Then fifth is the period of the Philippine Congress since the country became a republic up to the present. So ito yon. So the Treaty of Paris, 1898. Then yun, Philippine Commission. Then 1907, Philippine Commission, Philippine Assembly. Then 1916, Philippine Legislature. Then yung Commonwealth. National Assembly. 1940s, Republic noong 1946. Then the Philippine Congress to now. These are the 5 periods of legislation after the Treaty of Paris.